Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Cameras and Coffee. And Steinbeck, who gets the most love of anything on this channel. Pup. Yes, you're a good boy. Oh, I'm on your... No, I'm not on your tail. Okay, there we go. You're a good boy. So, in today's... Oh, I forgot my reference. Just a sec. In today's video, we're going to talk about 3 new lens announcements, and I need to be able to read them to talk about them. So 2 of them are the same basic spec, and then one of them is a zoom. So let me pull up the pages. And the first one that we're going to talk about is a lens I'm not actually ever going to own in all probability, because it's not for a system that I will ever actually own. It is the Samyang 85mm f1.4 for Canon EOS R mount. And there's a link in the description, of course, to all 3 of these pages about these lenses. And this is an exciting lens because it's really high spec. It's an autofocus lens from Samyang. And it's not, at least I should say, from the pictures, it's hard to say scale because there's nothing like, I don't know, a banana next to it to help figure out the scale. It doesn't look that big. So the sample images on my cell phone look fine, what I'd expect from Samyang, which makes good lenses and good primes. They are really good at making prime lenses. The lens also appears to have an internal focusing mechanism, which other Samyang lenses have. The 14mm f2.8 full-frame lens has internal focusing, and I believe, I haven't used it in a little while, so I don't remember for sure. I think the 10mm 2.8 APS-C lens has internal focusing. If that's not correct, someone in the comments will point that out. So internal focusing is something that I really like because it doesn't change the filter alignment. So if you're using a circular polarizing filter, right, and you spin it around, and to get the color, to eliminate glare, or to blue up the sky, or to minimize reflections on shiny surfaces, and you get it just right, and then you refine your focus, and the front of the lens moves, especially if it rotates, if it's like a consumer grade lens where the front of the lens rotates, it's going to throw off your CPL alignment. You're going to have to redo it. And that's kind of a pain. The other nice thing about internal focus rather, is that when you do manual focus, your hand will stay in the same place. So with the way that lenses used to work, of course, as you focused, now this one's nice because the focus ring stays in the same place, but the front of the lens would move in and out. And of course, with internal focus, you can focus and the lens size doesn't change. Also, if you're shooting macro work, which none of the lenses we're talking about today are for macros, but if you were, not having that, the front of that lens move in and out is very useful because it doesn't change your lens position relative to the macro item. And if it's something you're working really close to, that's very important. So I won't lie, if I was an EOS R user, the Samyang lens would absolutely be on my to-buy list. They always have really good image quality, and they are always very affordable. So it's good to see that Samyang's making some nice high-spec lenses with autofocus and that's also small compared to the next lens we're going to talk about for that system. The next lens we're going to talk about is one that I will buy. Not right away, obviously, but as soon as I can, and it is the Ricoh pentax-D FA Star 85mm f1.4 lens. When Ricoh started announcing the high-end lenses, I mean, I knew they'd be good. Pentax has a long history of absolutely amazing lenses, and they're one of the more underrated lens companies because the Pentax came out was for so long the default third-party camera maker lens mount that watered down the brand and the reputation of the K-mount. Pentax made lenses and Pentax designed lenses have always been absolutely spectacular. And if you have never used a nice high-end Pentax lens, it's a really nice experience. The image quality is just fantastic from them. But what didn't sell me, I'll grab my two little visual aids again. This is a Pentax FA 50mm 1.4 lens, 49mm lens thread, basically the exact same size as the SMC-M and the Takumars, and a little bit smaller than the SMC-K lenses. Not big. I mean, next to my head for comparison, you can see it's not all that big. Very lightweight, very easy to stash in a cargo pocket or something when you're out on a hike. So here is the Pentax-D FA Star 50mm f1.4, I forget the rest of the letters, SDM ADW lens. It's my favorite lens. I did not expect to like it as much as I did when I bought it because, well, it's got a 72mm front thread. It is the same size, or near as makes no difference, the same size as the Sony and Minolta 135mm f2.8 STF lens, which is huge, and it weighs about the same. This is a very hefty lens, and it's got a lot of glass in it, and it performs so much better than any Pentax 50mm lens that's come before it. It consistently exceeds everything that I expect it will do. The only problem, of course, is it weighs so darn much that I don't take it out very often because keeping it around my neck or in a camera case, I really, really feel it there. But it's the first, I think the first fast prime at least, of this Pentax lineup, the DFA stars. And Pentax used to use the star designation for the best of the best lenses that they produced. And they still are. That's what the star means. And they were the best optical quality, the best designing, the best production, and the best specification lenses. So the new Pentax lens that was announced, which should be available in just a few weeks, I think for around $2,000, which is a huge amount of money, I won't lie, is that, let me scroll down here to the specs section. So there's the Ricoh press release has a bunch of marketing stuff in it, talking about all of the great stuff and technology in this lens. Here it is. So 85mm, f1.4, full frame coverage, of course, all of that. Pentax KAF4 mount, which is the K1, K12, K3, some of the others. There's a list in the press release of compatible cameras. Not that many compatible cameras. We'll get back to that in a second. Stops down to f16, which realistically is all you actually need in a lens. Beyond that, and especially on digital, all you're seeing are dust spots on your sensors and diffraction softness. So realistically, there's no reason today in the digital market for a lens maker to go beyond f16. Just because they can doesn't mean that they should. It has no aperture ring because Pentax has done away with that, so all the aperture control is done on the camera, and it has 9 aperture blades. Now, I can't control the aperture on this without it being on a camera, but if I recall, the aperture blades stay pretty darn close to circular across the whole range. It is an electronically controlled aperture, and that can be a bit frustrating. I had to send both that lens and my K1 back in for warranty service last year. Actually, a year ago this time I sent them in. And it was 6 months before I got them back, because what was going on was that when I would film my camera manual videos, the camera points straight down at the table. And for some reason, either the lens or the camera, whatever it was, didn't like that and would just randomly open up the aperture and then not shut it back down in the middle of a video. And there wasn't like a set time that it was doing this. Just all of a sudden, it would go from f8 to f1.4 during recording. Everything would get really soft, obviously, and very bright. So that was a bit of a pain, but it was life. We worked through it. I got the lens back in November or December, and everything works beautifully now. So there are 12 lens elements in 10 groups. One of them is a spherical, and 3 of them have super extra dispersion elements. And it doesn't say whether they all have HD coating. I would assume so, but at least some of them do. And the HD coating on the Pentax lenses is spectacular. That 50 millimeter, I haven't been able to get it to flare, even with the sun in the frame or just off to the side of the image. It just does not do it. So the rest of the, another really nice thing about this is that the new ultrasonic motor in the 85 millimeter, because that lens is going to be huge. It has an 82 millimeter front element. It's going to be very heavy. That motor has 30% more torque. It's 1.3x, 1.3 times as strong as the motor in the 50 millimeter lens, which is going to be very important to move all of those heavy glass internal elements around quickly as well. So I don't know exactly how many of the elements are used in what I assume is in the internal focusing. It says that right there. I don't know how many of those elements are going to be used in it, but that motor is probably going to be moving, very important to move them quickly and without breaking. So the outside diameter is 95 millimeters and the length is 124 millimeters, which is 5 inches. And the weight is 2.75 pounds, which is 1.25 kilos. So not a light camera, to say the least. I'm sorry, not a light lens. The third lens that I'm excited about, but I will not be getting. Tamron has released 2 patents. Now, the article in here has some inconsistencies, but it looks like they are a 28 through 105 f4 and a 28 through 130 unknown aperture. So the 28 through 130 is a little bit more interesting. Is it 28 or is it 24? Yeah, 28 through 130. So on full frame, a 28 through 130 there's this Nikon that used to be made that was a 24 through 120 lens. Very, very usable walk-around lens. Everything from ultra-wide for landscapes to fairly narrow for portraits, and it was fairly solid across that whole range. Tamron makes exceptional zoom lenses. I've used a number of Tamron zooms, and I've been pleased with the performance of all of them. I don't think they make prime lenses anymore, and if it's because of the way that their old prime lenses performed, that's understandable. But their zoom lenses, and especially the ones they're coming out with now, are spectacular. So 28 through 130 would be a really good full-frame walk-around lens. You'd have everything from fairly wide for good landscapes to really narrow at 130, which is basically almost to the 135, which is the standard portrait range for portraits. So if you're, say, a wedding photographer looking for a single lens that can do basically everything, that's a possible candidate. The question is going to be, what's the maximum aperture? The Sony Alpha Rumors website doesn't indicate. But if that's an f2.8 across the spectrum, that's going to be a spectacular lens in terms of usability. If it's an f4, it'll still be pretty usable across the spectrum. But the nice thing about a faster lens isn't shooting wide open. It's having a brighter view screen and being able to use a slightly faster maximum sensitivity or ISO if needed. Realistically, with any of the lenses that we've talked about, if you're shooting them only wide open, you're not getting the best performance out of a lens. lenses have always been best when they're stopped down about 3 to 4 stops. So an f1.4, 3 to 4 stops is 1, 2, 3, 4. f4 to 5, 6, right? I had to count. I have not drunk enough of my coffee to do that math in my head. So an f1.4 lens is going to be at its best at f4 to f5, 6. As a general rule. With an 85 millimeter lens in the f4 to f5, 6 range, that means that what you're going to be able to do when you take a portrait, which is really what an 85 millimeter is for, it's a wide-ish portrait lens. You're going to be able to take a portrait where you'll be able to get the tip of the nose to behind the eyes of the person in focus, maybe back to the ears. That's about what f4, f5, 6 is going to look like. And that's pretty much perfect. You'll still have assuming that the aperture blades are circular or leave a circular aperture opening, you'll still get a very nice out of focus area behind the person at f4 to f5, 6. Also, realistically, if you wanted to go crazy and could bracket your aperture, if you shot one at f5, 6 and one at f1.4, for example, then in post you could overlay the images, erase the parts of the f1.4 image that you want to keep from the f5, 6 image, and then you could have the person's face in focus like it's f5, 6 and the background like it's f1.4. That's pretty easy to do. And that will, if for some reason the blur of the out of focus area at f4 to f5, 6 is not blurry enough, you can use that technique to recapture some of the blurriness of a wider aperture. So, any rate, the whole point of that is just to say that when you look at a lens's maximum aperture, the faster it is, the brighter your viewfinder is going to be on an optical viewfinder. And that also gives you an idea of where your optimal aperture is going to be by stopping down a couple of clicks. If you're using a lens that has a fastest aperture of f5, 6, you're probably looking at actually getting your best performance out of it in the f11 range. So, at any rate, so some very, very exciting lenses, and it's, part of it is the engineering for these probably started a year or two ago, and so they're just now being released at the worst possible time to be releasing new luxury products in a long time. So let's hope that they go well. My big concern about the Pentax lens is that it only uses the KAF4 mount. And the issue with that is, unless you are using one of the new Pentax DSLRs, you're not going to be able to use that lens. There are no KAF4 adapters to any of the mirrorless systems, at least not that I'm aware of. That's a problem, because it means that if somebody wants to use that lens, they also have to buy the Pentax camera. There are a lot of people who don't want to do that because Pentax cameras, though very capable, very, very capable, don't shoot 4K. They are not light. And even though they're inexpensive, they are big compared to, say, a mirrorless. And so there are a lot of people who would love to use these DFA star lenses, but who are not going to invest in the Pentax ecosystem to do it. That would be my theory. I think one thing Ricoh could do that would be very much to their lens sales advantage would be to try to license their own adapters from the KAF4 to other mounts. So if they could work with Sony or Canon, not likely, or Nikon, not likely, to get the ability to make KAF4 adapters to those systems, that would increase their ability to sell these really, really nice high-end lenses. And honestly, I think that the 50mm 1.4 if I could use it on my A7S II, would be the lens that I use every day for these videos. It would be the one that I use every day when I make a camera manual as well. So it would be really nice if I had the ability to do that. But at any rate, Ricoh, if you're looking for ideas for products, and if you have the ability to make that adapter happen for Sony, that would be a good one. That would allow you to move more of those lenses for people who don't want to buy into the K-mount ecosystem. So, at any rate, some really exciting new lenses. This is a fantastic time to be a camera gearhead because the lenses that are coming out now across the board, OEM or third party, just spectacular performers, especially the top-notch lenses. The engineering on them is really getting to a very, very good point with where quality is definitely becoming pretty uniform. So at any rate, that is it for today. Steinbeck and I had a nice 7-mile hike. Yes, we did yesterday with about 1,500 feet of gain and knee-deep snow for 4 miles. So yeah, Sunday I think it was, I released my Nikon D1, the first of 3 videos about that. The other 2 will come out this week. And I was talking about it being weather sealed. Very useful yesterday when I stepped wrong and slid into some mud. And when I sat up, realized not only was I caked in mud, so was my D1. Because yesterday on the hike, I brought the D1 and my A7S II. And so in addition to the D1 videos, the other 2 parts of that, later this week I will try to release the hike video for the Wheeler Lakes hike because there's no film to develop and that should be out pretty soon. And it was a good hike. And I have a very exhausted pup. So at any rate, happy Wednesday, everybody. I'll see you Friday and we'll talk about some more stuff that's going on in the photography and camera industry.